Hey the people, how you doing? So today we have the video comparison between the OnePlus 8 Pro, probably one of the most famous and one of the best value flagships from last year, versus the next generation flagship, the S21 Ultra. Now obviously the S21 Ultra is quite a bit more expensive, so do keep that in mind, throughout the comparison. But with that said, let's get started because there are quite a few things here. So this is the front camera video sample for both of these, and obviously we have 4K 30 for the S21 Ultra, but for the OnePlus 8 Pro we are still, even after a whole year, we are still stuck at 1080p 30, and it's kind of sad because the rest of the cameras in terms of versatility and feature set, it's good, but the front cameras, it really doesn't have much to it. It's just 1080p 30. Nothing really noticeably good about it. The S21 on the other hand can go up to 4K 60. I wouldn't recommend using 4K 60 because it's 4K 60 isn't the best way to go because there are sacrifices, and on the front cameras it really doesn't matter much. But 4K 30 still looks fantastic. At least like in my experience, it's been amazing. 1080p 30 on the OnePlus 8 Pro, not that good. So for this selfie video right here, well, I gotta say the S21 Ultra, unquestionably so, looks a lot more detailed. There is a resolution, of course, and I do like the colors on the S21 a little bit more. It's a bit more accurate. The field of view as well is a little bit wider on the S21, so that's something to keep in mind. And lastly, the noise is actually higher on the S21. It's better reduced on the OnePlus 8 Pro, but that also does have the side effect of having a lot more smudged out details. So keeping that in mind, I would say I prefer the slightly noisier but also better detailed S21 Ultra's footage compared to the lower res, the not as color accurate footage of the OnePlus 8 Pro. As for 4K 30 with the rear cameras, I would say that there isn't any major difference. The only visible difference is the contrast. It is a little bit higher on the OnePlus 8 Pro, and well, I'm not a huge fan of it. I prefer the S21. I feel like it's a little bit more balanced, and in certain situations, especially when we are looking up towards the sun with the cameras, of course, well, it does appear as if the OnePlus is blowing out the sky sometimes a little bit more than the S21. So sacrificing dynamic range in that manner, I'm not a huge fan of. So I do prefer the S21 in terms of the color processing and contrast and balance and all that. So yeah, other than that though, there really isn't much to talk about. Now 4K 60, I do gotta mention that the OnePlus 8 Pro, just like the S21 Ultra, can do 4K 60 from all of its cameras. This is the main camera right here, and you know what? I feel like the S21 isn't as detailed as the OnePlus 8 Pro. I didn't expect that, to be honest. There is higher contrast on the OnePlus, so that could in some way be aiding the 4K 60, but even so, I feel like the details are a little bit more sharp on the OnePlus 8 Pro, which is definitely not something I expected, but nice to see. As for 4K 60 with the ultra-wide cameras, well, I gotta say, you guys should be able to see the difference in details because it's so staggering that even with YouTube compression, it should be visible. The OnePlus 8 Pro, I'm not entirely sure what exactly is playing a part in this, but it's so much more detailed compared to the S21 Ultra that it's almost like I'm comparing 1080p to 4K video. That's the amount of difference I can see in terms of details. There is so much more over sharpening, and there's a ton of artifacts on the S21 Ultra. In the ultra-wide video in particular, the main camera was fine. And secondly, I do gotta mention this, the OnePlus 8 Pro can switch between the ultra-wide and main cameras while we're recording. On the S21, for some odd reason, this is not possible. We can switch to the main camera, but we gotta stop recording, which is just weird. The feature should exist, in theory at least. Now for super steady video on the S21 versus super stable video on the OnePlus 8 Pro. Well, credit where due, I do think the S21 Ultra definitely has better stabilization as such. Like the jerks are ever so slightly less visible, less noticeable on the S21, but everything else, video quality, dynamic range, details, every single thing other than stabilization is better on the OnePlus 8 Pro. We do have 4K 30 for super steady, so like that's in and of itself quite an achievement if you ask me. It looks so much better compared to the S21 Ultra. I mean, yeah, the S21 can do 1080p 60 and you can slow it down. It'll look even more stable that way. But you know what? If I had to pick one, I would easily pick the OnePlus 8 Pro's 4K Super Steady over the S21s. I mean, yeah, if you're gonna run with your camera, then maybe the S21 is gonna be better, but other than that, even walking so fast, the difference in stabilization compared to everything else is just negligible. Now we're using 8K on the S21 Ultra versus normal 4K because we do not have 8K on the OnePlus. And well, I gotta say, the OnePlus's wider field of view and the crop on the S21 Ultra because of 8K really makes it hard to frame the shots as it would appear. But anyways, as you can see, I'm just trying to see which one can focus well enough. I mean, the main test was for the 8K video on the Samsung, but it would appear that it's not as consistent, but it does actually manage to focus on the flower until I actually brought the OnePlus 8 Pro closer. Then it focused on the flower, which was just weird to be honest. As for stabilization, it's not as stable as a OnePlus, but it's still pretty good considering there's a huge crop, there's a ton of processing involved because 8K video. Dynamic range as well isn't as good as the OnePlus 8 Pro, but that's kind of expected to be honest. And here's another shot at trying to focus, and here the S21 did take a moment, but it actually managed to focus versus the OnePlus just not being able to do it at all. Now testing out the versatility, we can go to the ultra wide, then to the main camera, and all the way up to 3 times optical zoom on the S21 Ultra. Now obviously that's not where it ends. 10 times optical zoom on the S21 Ultra. Honestly, I still, for the life of me, haven't found a proper use case for it. In video, I just don't feel like 10 times zoom is necessary in the slightest. On the OnePlus, we do have the ultra wide, then we can go to the main camera, and finally we have 3 times optical zoom here. But that is where it ends, no 10 times or anything. Now for Indo's 4K 30, here we have a pretty high contrast situation, a lot of highlights on the right versus pretty dark shadows on the left. The S21 Ultra is definitely maintaining those shadows a little bit better versus the OnePlus is actually trying to do some dynamic range magic, and you can see it is kind of looking flat but also definitely giving us more shadow detail, so that's something to keep in mind. As for focusing and details, it's very similar. I don't think there's going to be any major difference as such. Both of them are very good with 4K 30 video, as you can see right here. But upon closer inspection, I do think that the focusing is just a tad bit faster on the S21 Ultra versus the OnePlus 8 Pro. It's not a major difference, but a difference nonetheless. Now I did try out the HDR mode on the OnePlus 8 Pro. Now it basically improves dynamic range, hopefully. I don't really see much of a difference here at least, but it does cut out versatility entirely. If you want to use HDR mode, it's the main camera only. You can't use the ultra wide or the zoom. But what strikes me as very surprising is that the OnePlus 8 Pro is not focusing properly. You can see it's very inaccurate, and compared to even normal 4K 30, it's not good, not in the slightest. Now I'm not exactly certain why this is the case, because earlier on when I had compared the OnePlus with the iPhone 12, HDR mode actually helped improve focusing. So why it's getting degraded now, I'm not entirely certain. Does something with the software have anything to do with it? I don't really know, but yeah, it's not really nice to see, to be honest. Now let's try out some even harsher conditions. We have a backlit shot right here, that too backlit by a studio light, and yeah, neither of these are particularly good. I mean, the S21, it does have less of the haze and the faded look from the highlights. It does have better dynamic range in terms of controlling said highlights, but it's not very good because there is a ton of smearing on the S21 Ultra. It's a major problem that I've noticed before as well when I compared the S21 with the iPhone 12, and it seems like that has not been fixed. Even with the latest software update, I had hoped that something might have happened, but seems unlikely. It really doesn't look nice, and in situations like these where there is a backlight, it's just gonna end up looking smudged up entirely, as you can see right here. Now if I were to pick one, I don't really know which one to go for, but the smearing, I cannot stand it. I'm actually gonna go for the OnePlus 8 Pro, but you guys pick your poison right here. Now this right here is a medium indoors lighting situation, and well, I gotta say both of them look pretty nice. Now you'll notice that the OnePlus is actually very bright, obviously up until the point Valentine just decided to come and bite the camera, but nonetheless I do think that it's overexposing ever so slightly. It's not a huge deal, to be honest. It looks pretty nice, but yeah, I do think that the overall balance in terms of the contrast and exposure, I prefer it on the S21 Ultra compared to the OnePlus 8 Pro. Now you guys might like the OnePlus, that's completely dependent on personal opinion, but yeah, other than that, I do want to point out that if you were to observe very closely, you'll notice that there is some amount of smearing on the S21 Ultra, but it's minor to the point that it's basically unnoticeable. I mean, I had to personally look quite hard to really find the little bits of smearing here and there. But really, it's not a problem in medium to good lighting, so yeah, I think the problem really exists in low light. And that is what we are moving on to right here, and yeah, the smearing is very much present and it does not look good. Now we are using the HDR mode on the OnePlus 8 Pro. That does give us a much better overall video quality. It's just much sharper, it has very good noise reduction to couple with it, and the dynamic range as a whole, it's amazing to be honest. So yeah, overall I do actually prefer the OnePlus 8 Pro when it comes to just low light video and focusing as well. I would say that in low light both have very similar accuracy and overall speed in terms of focusing, so there's not much of a difference here. Now one feature which kind of felt interesting but was very lackluster on the OnePlus 8 Pro is nightscape video. Now I'll give it the credit it's due. It's bright. It's definitely very bright compared to the S21 Ultra, as you can see, but man, is it soft. It's got no detail whatsoever. I mean, we're using the same 1080p 30 mode on the S21 Ultra, and as a matter of fact, I do think that the smearing is much less in 1080p versus 4K, so that's very interesting to notice. I do think that the software has something to do with this. It's why we have so much of smearing, so yeah. 1080p 30 is much better in low light as it would appear on the S21. The OnePlus, however, it's bright, sure, but it does not look good. Alright, now let's move on to 8K video, but this time we're using the medium to good lighting, indoors lighting kind of situation. And well, I gotta say, the S21 Ultra looks surprisingly good. It's got a lot less noise and a lot more detail than I had presumed would be the case. The OnePlus already looks good. I mean, yeah, in this situation, most phones would do a good job, but the 8K mode in particular was definitely not something I had my hopes up for, but it's really nice to see that the 8K has had some serious software improvements such that there is almost no noise and the details are very rich. As for night mode time-lapse, well, we do have that feature only on the S21 Ultra. This is regular 4K time-lapse on the OnePlus 8 Pro, and yes, 4K looks nice, but without night mode, at night, obviously, it's gonna look horrible. As you can see, it's smudged up, no details, it just doesn't look good. The S21 on the other hand, well, it's basically flawless. With 4K and night mode, I mean, it looks incredible. Now finally we have slow motion. This is 1080p at 240 for both of them, and yeah, the OnePlus, I mean, at first glance it might look better because it's slightly brighter, but it's got way more noise. I mean, I don't know how much of it you guys can see, but it's horrible on the OnePlus 8 Pro versus the S21. Now the S21 does have some amount of noise and flicker, but it's not nearly as bad. I mean, it's a massive difference to be honest. And secondly, the over sharpening. I mean, I can visibly see the amount of over sharpening, and it's almost making it look kind of pixelated, especially in the reflection of the light. It really doesn't look good on the OnePlus 8 Pro. Now, on the S21 Ultra, the overall image isn't as sharp, but it does nullify over sharpening almost entirely. It does look better overall in my opinion, and I'm definitely going to give a win to the S21 Ultra for slow motion. So that is it for this video comparison, and well, I gotta say, I didn't really expect as many wins from the OnePlus 8 Pro as it did get, because damn, I mean, I gotta say, the OnePlus 8 Pro's video was already impressive. It has fantastic video, and for the price, it's amazing. the normal 4K 30 can be very, very good, and I'm not entirely sure why HDR mode was so bad in focusing, because you can check out my videos. I've done all of the video comparisons for the OnePlus 8 Pro, and HDR mode actually helped out earlier, but I'm not entirely sure what happened in this comparison. I did take numerous samples and it didn't seem to focus properly. So yeah, other than that, I do think that the OnePlus is fantastic. I don't think that the S21 Ultra, in terms of video at least, has a clear win here. At least it's good, it's very good. It does have better versatility, but I mean, to be honest, after 3 times zoom, having a 10 times zoom is good, but I personally don't really see a good use case for it. In photography, alright, it's possible 10 times zoom can be useful, but in video, not really. So yeah, versatility is a win from a technical standpoint on the S21 Ultra, but for practical use cases, not really. As for the overall quality, well, I do think that the OnePlus 8 Pro, in certain situations like in good daylight or maybe in medium lighting, I do think that it has better overall quality, especially in 4K 60. You guys saw right there in the ultra wide cameras, it was an enormous difference, and that's really something because the OnePlus 8 Pro is a last year's flagship. So the fact that it can produce better quality video compared to the S21 Ultra even, I mean, that's not something I expected, but that does seem to be the case. And the S21 Ultra would have gotten much more wins in terms of the video comparison if it did not have that horrible smearing. I do think it has something to do with the software, and it really needs to be fixed ASAP. So yeah, not exactly the conclusion I expected, but it appears that video needs some serious work on the S21. The OnePlus, on the other hand, very impressive. I mean, it does have some work to do on the focusing side of things, but other than that, it's an amazing device for video. So that is it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, do hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be seeing you guys later. Cheers.